And Rat of Sumatra, a story for which the world is not yet prepared.
Well, I think it's a story for which the world is still not prepared. I think it's one of those stories that never got told, that a very great writer used to scatter liberally throughout his works, terrible teases and tantalizations. I think it's Conan Doyle, and he never told us about the giant rat of Sumatra.
That illusion, that tantalizing illusion, occurs in his story, The Sussex Vampire, in the casebook of Sherlock Holmes. But there is a giant rat of Sumatra. It's up to 19 inches long without the tail and can weigh up to 20 pounds. Yeah. But he never wrote the story. Kit Hesketh Harvey, where would you encounter these?
Rats made nests inside men's Sunday hats and even spoiled the women's chats by drowning their speaking with shrieking and squeaking in 50 different shops and flats.
Terrible prep school memories. Yes, it's the 19th century gravy man, isn't it? Robert Browning. He's in the Pied Piper of Hamelin.
And it goes on and on. On and on and on and on.
Yes, I'm a great fan of Browning's, I must say. I think he's terribly underrated, but that wasn't one of his greatest bits.
Sandy Toksvig, not all rats have 4 legs, of course. With whom would you associate the cry?
You dirty rat.
Golly, what a marvellous impersonation. That's Princess Diana.
Satire.
Talking to almost anybody she knows. Oh, of course, that'll be our Jimmy Cagney. He did a number of gangster films.
That's right. Well, it's James Cagney according to the Impressionists, because according to James Cagney himself, he never actually said, "You dirty rat," but what he did say in gangster mode was that someone was a dirty double-crossing rat, and also on another occasion, "Come out and take it, you dirty yellow-bellied rat," which amounts to much the same thing.
Clever boy for learning those extra words, though.
Yes. Dennis Norden, can you remember on what occasion that wonderful familiar figure, a BBC spokesman, said,
"This must be the first time a rat has come to the aid of a sinking ship"?
It was a very BBC reference to Roland Rat, who was a puppet figure who got TV AM out of trouble. I always remember about that at the times of that struggle, was that TVAM put up a very good fight for its existence, and the famous 5 who ran it, one of them was interviewed after the Roland Rat episode, and he said valiantly, "To the best of my knowledge, TVAM will triumph at the end of the day." And of course, it was the beginning of the day when they were in trouble.
This Roland Rat reference by BBC spokesman, not entirely original, because Churchill said of a Liberal candidate in an election long ago, "It is the first time I have heard of a rat actually swimming out to join a sinking ship." So to round 2, you find famous quotations in unlikely settings, not least when they are set to music. So can you identify these quotations when they are sung? And less importantly, who is doing the singing? Polly, here is the one for you. Yeah, but did you hear what they were singing? "Money is the root of all evil."
You want to know who was singing it, or you want to know
Let's
where
start
it
with
came
who was singing it, yes.
Well, I think it was the Beverly Sisters.
No, it wasn't.
No.
It wasn't the Bevs, it was the other lot.
The other, the Andrews.
Yes, the Andrews
sisters.
sisters.
Yes.
Yes.
Right.
But where
and
is this?
"Money is the root of all evil," I think comes from Chaucer. And it comes usually in Latin. But
Go on.
maybe originally it's radix malorum est cupiditas in Chaucer. Good Lord. And, not bad, is it? Not bad. And I think originally probably from the Bible, but don't ask me whereabouts.
Yes, well, I will tell you, it was in the first epistle of Paul to Timothy, and more correctly, it is "the love of money is the root of all evil." Kit, now then, I hope you can bear this.
No man is an island, no man alone can be. The bell that tolls for another man, it tolls for you and me.
beautiful. It comes from one of my favourite poets, John Donne, the randy old canon of Dean, wasn't he? Dean of St Paul's. But I have no idea who was singing it. Sounds like early Eurovision, doesn't it?
Well, yes, it is almost early Eurovision, but I think they're American, and they were called the Limelighters.
The Limelighters.
Yes. But indeed, it is from famous John Donne. No man is an island, entire of itself, and therefore never send to know for whom the bell tells, it tells for thee. What a relief to be moving on. Now then, this is very curious. Sandy, stand by for blast off.
Well, there you are. And let's all remember that, shall we? A fine saying that is. That's that odd thing when you used to sing hymns at school and you used to go, and I have no idea what the words were. I couldn't hear what they were singing.
You couldn't.
I think it's some grand. Is it a grand choir of some kind?
Well, it's a great choir, yes. It's the great Mormon
the Mormon
Tabernacle choir, yes.
The Mormon Tabernacles, but quite what words of import they were giving, I couldn't say.
I thought I detected signs of interest and knowledge. Polly, you're nodding.
Yes, this is Moon Talk. This is one small step and one great big step.
Neil Armstrong.
Which way round it was?
Yeah.
Neil Armstrong.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's been made into a hymn.
It sounds like it.
A Mormon hymn. That's not a real hymn.
Yeah. Well, anyway, and the curious thing that Neil Armstrong, what he actually said when he got it wrong, as everybody knows, he got his line wrong, but they get it right. So they sing one small step for a man, one giant leap for mankind.
Well, he had other things on his mind.
He probably did. Anyway, nice to hear the great Mormon Tabernacle Choir again. And Dennis, famous first words of a novel as they ended up in a musical.
Take it was a musical of Tale of Two Cities.
The music was called Two Cities, and it lasted about two days, I think.
Yeah. I was Thames TV shortly before its demise. I was asked to do a program about situation comedies that they put out, because they were the most prolific of the ITV companies in situation comedies. So I started the first week by saying, it was the best of Thames, it was the worst. And it got cut because they all thought it was negative sounding, although it was really only half negative sound. And nobody realized the reference at all.
Oh, well, there you go. Well, we on this show, we appreciate it. Moving on, thank you. If you have written to us on Quote Unquote, especially if you have spread any enlightenment about the sources of quotations. On an earlier occasion, I correctly attributed to Christopher Logue the poem that goes,
Come to the edge, we might fall. Come to the edge, it's too high. Come to the edge, and they came, and he pushed, and they flew.
But a number of you wrote to say you thought it was by the French poet Apollinaire, and that you'd seen it so attributed in the TV shows of the American magician David Copperfield. Well, I asked Christopher Logue, and he told me that he did indeed write those words, but they were for a poster for an Apollinaire exhibition at the ICA in the early 1960s. And on the poster, Logue's poem was preceded by the words, Apollinaire said. So hence, no doubt, the confusion. And his lack of royalties from David Copperfield. Glyn Allen of Bourton in Cheshire writes to give the likely true origin of a joke we have mentioned before on the programme. It comes from the story Reginald's Rubaiyat by Saki.
It occurred to me that I'd like to be a poet. The chief qualification, I understand, is that you must be born. Well, I hunted up my birth certificate, and I found that I was all right on that score.
And the origin of another celebrated story about an actor has been traced by W.G. MacNay of Strathaven in Lanarkshire to the caption of a Punch cartoon by D.L. Gilchick, who flourished in that paper in the 1920s. The actual wording goes like this: celebrity. After lengthy monopoly of the conversation...
But enough about me. Let's talk about yourself. Tell me, what do you think of my part in the new play?
That may be the origin of that joke. Well, time now for me to seek advice from you, or rather, what quotable pieces of advice have you ever been given, whether or not you actually follow them? Polly Toynbee, have you ever been advised?
I've been looking back to the first day when I first got my first job in newspapers on The Observer, and I was a very young thing. And an old chap from the subs desk came up to me and said, there's one or two things you need to learn. And he taught me how to write secret notes in my pocket with a short stub of a pencil with nobody looking, because he'd been trained in the days before tape recorders.
Ah, when you were interviewing somebody.
When you were interviewing someone, you didn't want them to know that you were secretly taking notes. You take a very, very short stub of a pencil and you can teach yourself to write comprehensible notes inside your pocket.
Look as though you've got fleas.
When you get home, you've got these funny marks on your leg, I would have thought.
And then he said to me rather mysteriously, one more thing, he said, throw away your babies. And I thought this was rather alarming advice. What he actually meant, and I think it's very good advice for writers, is that if you think you've penned an absolute gem of a paragraph, or an absolute wonderful opening paragraph, or a marvellous phrase or metaphor, throw it away. It's almost certainly naff.
Kit Hesketh Harvey, what advice have you ever been given?
Well, my sister had one of those marvellously fruity old godfathers, the sort who touch you for a fiver if an egg's out rather than the other way around. He, when it came to her confirmation, didn't give her religious instruction or a fat check, which she was expecting, but took her to one side and said, I'm going to give you a piece of advice, darling. Always drink champagne and never go to bed with your makeup on, which has stood her in firm stead ever since. But my,
And has that helped you?
Always, yes. I never go to bed with my makeup on. Wash it off with champagne. But the other advice came from my dear mamma, who, like Sandy, is a Guildford girl, and believes that love means always having to say you're sorry. And she couldn't understand that my wife and I wanted to move to Norfolk. She was absolutely appalled and horror-struck and said, darling, you can't move to Norfolk. It's in the east. You won't get the sun in the afternoons.
Well, thank you. Sandy, what is advice, please?
When I first started the business, I worked with a wonderful actress called Dilys Hamlet. And she says to me, darling, she said a little bit of advice. She says, if you must do Shakespeare, always play royalty, because you never carry props and you always get a chair.
Not so long ago, you were seen on a yacht going round the British Isles, and those, lots of those sea dogs must surely have queued up to give you advice.
Yes, we've got lots and lots of pieces of advice. Never stand downwind of somebody who's feeling unwell. Is quite good. My favourite was never stand on a rope that somebody else is pulling. Which I learnt to my cost. It's a dangerous enterprise.
Ah, yes. I know you're going to continue with your yachting experts.
No.
Well, that's that then. Dennis, advice.
Advice, yes. I heard on radio, you have to sit, this is a commercial radio station, where you have to sit through the horoscopes in order to get the news. So I heard one of the horoscopes was, seek financial advice from someone you can trust. And I thought to myself, who else? But the only personal advice that I can... It's an awful thing, but my father was a very moral man, and he was advising me all day long, all the time, on every aspect of behavior. And the only one that has stuck with me is always try and avoid the North Circular Road.
Well, now back to the quiz. And to quotations about a famous literary figure who's very popular these days. Polly Toynbee, can you work out who we're talking about from this remark made in 1995 by Charles Denton, who was at that time head of BBC television drama?
She is obviously the Quentin Tarantino of the middle classes.
Most inapt, I think. I think that he was talking about that tremendous money spinner for the BBC, that dazzling new discovery of theirs, Jane Austen. What Jane Austen has to do with Quentin Tarantino, I don't know. I can't think of any form of violence or murder or mayhem that goes on in Jane Austen. I think it's very odd. Perhaps that's why Charles Denton is no longer with us.
Ah, yes. Well, a great stylist anyway, Jane Austen and Quentin Tarantino. And it was a remark which he made at a time when her Persuasion and Pride and Prejudice were being adapted again as TV films, and Sense and Sensibility was coming along in the cinema. Kit Hesketh Harvey, whose tribute to Jane Austen was paid in verse like this.
Jane lies in Winchester. Blessed be her shade. Praise the Lord for making her, and her for all she made. And while the stones of Winchester or Milsom Street remain, glory, love, and honor unto England's Jane.
Gracious. Well, it certainly wasn't Jane Austen, was it?
No. Tumpty.
Terrible.
Tumpty.
Who is that by? Is that by Southey, or who was around when, or
Bit later.
bit later? Oh golly, it can't be Browning. It's
Later than Browning?
Later even than Browning. Oh gracious.
End of the 19th century.
End of the 19th century. Christina Rossetti. No, she was better than that. Christina Rossetti. I have no idea.
It was Rudyard Kipling.
It was Kipling.
Yes.
Oh dear.
Tumpty. In his poem, in his poem Jane's Marriage, in which he speculates on which man loved Jane Austen and concludes that it was Captain Wentworth in Persuasion.
Oh really?
Sandy, which male novelist and near contemporary, comparing himself to Jane Austen, wrote,
The big bow wow strain I can do myself like any now going. But that young lady has a talent for describing the involvements and feelings and characters of ordinary life, which is to me the most wonderful thing I ever met with.
Who's contemporary with her novels at the time?
He wrote this in his journal, or as he would
Byron was always busy scribbling away.
getting warm.
Getting warm.
He would have pronounced it journal.
No, I'm sorry.
He was a Scottish person.
A Scottish person. Begins with B, Burns.
No, novelist. We'll get there in the end. Don't worry, stick around. Sir Walter Scott.
Bless him.
Yes, he'd just been reading Pride and Prejudice, and he came out with this rather nice tribute, which ended, what a pity she died so young. And Dennis Norton, who took this less respectful view.
When I take up one of Jane Austen's books, I feel like a barkeeper entering the kingdom of heaven. I know what his sensation would be and his private comments. He would not find the place to his taste, and he'd probably say so.
Well, barkeeper is not an English. It would indicate American.
Yes, you're right. Well, who usually comes up with
Well,
it?
that's it. We did 30-odd years of my word. When in doubt on an American writer, say either Mark Twain or Washington Irving. Which one's like?
I haven't read Washington Irving, so it's
No.
Mark Twain. Yes. Mark Twain on Jane Austen. A cautious tribute to her. And for round 4, from one woman in particular to women in general and some of their concerns. Polly, who wrote this? And why must you treat the quotation with caution?
Whatever they may be in public life, whatever their relations with men, in their relations with women, all men are rapists. And that's all they are. They rape us with their eyes, their laws, and their codes.
It was a book by Marilyn French called Woman's Room, and I think the point was that Marilyn French didn't say it herself, but she had a character say it. But that seemed to make very little difference. It took off just as bra burning took off when apparently there was never a bra burnt.
Yes, one of the characters in her book, whose daughter has been raped, says it. And as Marilyn French points out, nobody holds up Iago's speeches in Othello and blames Shakespeare for holding those views. But there we are. Yes, Marilyn French, The Women's Room. Kit Hesketh Harvey, have you any idea who said this and why?
This world consists of men, women, and Harveys.
Yes, I'm afraid I do. It's haunted me since university, that one. Yes, it was Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, that splendid creature, who I think she ganged up with Pope or somebody against the then Harvey of Ickworth, who was Lord Frederick Harvey, who initiated what obviously has become a proud old family tradition of sort of decadence up at Ickworth. And I don't know quite, he was known as Lord Fanny, wasn't he? And I don't quite know why.
I have no idea why. According to the Dictionary National biography, he died in 1743, incidentally. He had loose morals, was effeminate in appearance as well as in habits, but he had 8 children. So
a very, very distant tradition, I hasten to admit.
Sandy Tuxwick, which man wrote on this subject?
The great question that has never been answered and which I have not yet been able to answer, despite my 30 years of research into the feminine soul, is, what does a woman want?
Well, bless him, he obviously didn't get out much money, is the answer. Not complicated, and somebody to lift the luggage. Basically what women want. It sounds like
yes. In Vienna, this research.
It's a Freudian man, maybe.
Well, it was
Mr. Freud
himself. Yes, Sigmund Freud, in a letter to a woman, Marie Bonaparte, and the question became a sort of rallying cry for feminists. There was a book called "What Do Women Want" by Susie Orbach and Louise Eichenbaum, and Dennis. Which woman said this?
I married beneath me, all women do.
In the 30s and 40s, this was a lady who was one of the favorite butts of all the comedians and the cartoonists because 2 reasons. One, she was in favor of being teetotal. She was very strongly anti-drink. And secondly, she was the first woman who entered the House of Commons. Nancy Astor, Lady Astor, as we used to call her then. She was a great character.
Yeah, and she in fact, she didn't marry for money because she was quite a wealthy person herself. But her husband became Viscount Astor, so that's why she was Lady Astor. But I married beneath me, all women do. Read there, I thought, by William Franklin, as if she was Lady Bracknell. But well, from men and women to families and to those catchphrases which may be unique to one household or get spoken quite broadly on the domestic front. We call them family sayings. Polly Toynbee.
I like family sayings where children completely misunderstand the meaning of some familiar phrase. And there was a very good one, because I once said to my small son, pick up all your toys or else. And he ran screaming into his sister's room and shouted, help, help, she's going to give me else. And after that, it always used to be a family saying, and he used to say, will it be else if I don't? We never got down to else, I might hasten to say.
Good. Kit, what about you?
Well, I have some cousins in Northumberland who farm, and the borders, ever since Mel Gibson first put on Number 7, have been a strange place. And some neighbours of theirs up at the Big House had a new butler, and it was his first day on, and he was rather tremulously serving the soup at dinner. And there was no sign of the laird. His mother, the dowager, was at the end of the table drumming her fingers on the mahogany, wondering where he got to. And this nervous butler was going round. And suddenly the double doors flew open, and in walked the laird, wearing a fabulous beaded Schiaparelli evening gown. And there was a moment's frozen silence. The dowager eyeballed her son and said, Bobby, what on earth are you wearing? And the butler leaned over and whispered into her ear, wasn't what I put out for him, my lady. But it wasn't what I put out for him, my lady, can be applied to almost any social situation. And so that's our family thing.
Oh. Can you follow that, Sandy?
I don't know. It's a difficult thing of family sayings, but the only thing I think is my father was a journalist, and we spent an awful lot of time on the road in America, traveling endlessly. And my father developed this thing that wherever we were, he'd suddenly turn to us in the back of the car, my brother and I, rather bored. He'd say, well, just think, if we lived here, we'd be home now. It's terribly irritating, and I do it now. I say it in the car all the time. Well, just think, terribly annoying.
Family life is such fun, isn't it? Yes. Dennis, how about you?
Well, we've kind of adopted some of the things that our children said when they were small, like always referring to horseradishes, horse rubbish. But the other one, when I was a very small boy, part of my duties was to change the library book for an aunt of mine. We used to have to go to lending libraries, Boots, which used to have little shields as bookmarks on a string, some of them more prematurely grey, nodding in acknowledgement. And she always used to want say, ask the lady if she's got an eye book about doctors. Now, that wasn't about ophthalmologists or anything like that. It was a book about doctors written in the first person. So any autobiography has been known ever since as an eye book.
And now that you're a man of mature years, if I may phrase it like that, do you have sort of sayings that you have in your family that you find yourself always saying?
Yes, I'm always saying either many years ago or when I was your age. And I tend to finish them with, which was a lot of money in those days.
And finally, we return to the theme of advice, or at least helpful observations about the nature of life sent in by quote-unquote listeners. Nathan Wise, who listens to us in Canterbury, Connecticut, in the United States, remembers hearing the Reverend William Sloane Coffin, a noted chaplain at Yale University, say,
Even if you win the rat race, you're still a rat.
Rats again. And W.P. Cloutman of London SW11 writes to say that when he was a young management trainee at the Ford Motor Company in Dagenham, a gnarled old hand on the line said to him,
Son, always remember that in this life, it's not so much a question of starting at the bottom. It's more a question of starting at the right bottom.
So, there's your thought for the week. Goodbye.
Taking part in quote-unquote were Kit Hesketh-Harvey, Dennis Norden, Sandy Toksvig, and Polly Toynbee. William Franklin read the quotations, Nigel Rees devised and introduced the program, and the producer was Chris Neal.